1993 was the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Ortona, a battle fought in this little port city halfway up the boot of Italy on the Adriatic coast. It was a battle in which the 49th Loyal Edmonton Regiment distinguished itself, but was devastated in the process. The 1st German Parachute Division was severely mauled, leaving town the 28th of December, 1943, and the little port was left in ruins. Edmonton's Italian community and members of the 49th celebrated this anniversary at Villa Vesuvius on December 4th, 1993, and it was here that the idea for a trip to Ortona was born, and over the next few months was nurtured by Wally Ross, Ed Boyd, ex-colonels of the 49th, and Mr. Giuseppe Imbolzano, Vice Consul of Italy for Alberta, and numerous faceless individuals between here and Caesar's Domain. And the trip was on. Please send money. Our itinerary was as follows. On landing in Rome, we are picked up by bus and driven to Ortona, where we will spend 4 days. We are then bused to Venice for 3 days, 1 day at Voghera's Wartime Museum, 1 day at Florence, then on to Rome, which will include 1 day at Monte Cassino, and then home. A get-together was arranged and sponsored by Mr. Imbolzano at the Italian Cultural Center on September the 10th, at which time we were given name tags, airline tickets, and kits with maps, information, and giveaway pins. We were also told we would be billeted with Ortona citizens, and some token of appreciation should be taken along to thank our hosts. And so, Thursday, October 12th, saw 34 anxious people arrive at Edmonton's International Airport, ready to take a step back into the past for veterans, their wives to witness the little port city they'd heard about, and others to verify the regiment's place in history. Here, checking their baggage, are Phoebe Campbell, Alderman Bruce Campbell's wife. Bruce will represent the city of Edmonton. Blanche and Art Edge, with Ray Springsteel in the background. Canadian Airlines will be our mode of transportation to and from Italy, with changeovers at Toronto both ways. We have landed at Rome's Leonardo Airport, where we are to be met by Napoleon bus lines from Ortona. Getting aboard for the 3-hour journey are Art Edge with his farmer hat, Tornillo Fabri, our interpreter and head of the Italian Combatants Association in Edmonton, Mario the bus driver, and Ray Springsteel. After bulldozing his way through Rome's mid-morning traffic, we eventually hit 824 Autostrada on our way to crossing the Apennine Mountains, the backbone of Italy, and beautiful Italian scenery unfolds. Hilltop towns and villages emerge and disappear from view as we speed eastward. A stop for coffee is made, super coffee I must add, and taking a picture of me taking one is Ed Boyd. The happy travelers left to right are Blanche and Art Edge, Eva McPhee, and Eileen Ross. And mugging for the camera is Wally McVie. The autostradas crossing over to the Adriatic are superhighways where, if there's a coulee, the Italians have bridged it, and if the mountain is too high, they've tunneled it. Churches dominate most of the villages as we pass by. And speaking of churches, this one should be familiar to any Ortona veteran. It is San Tommaso Church, destroyed in the fighting of 1943. 22 hours after rising, we are finally at Ortona, Ortona a Mare, Ortona by the sea. Instead of being billeted with townspeople, we've been informed we will be staying at Hotel Moderna, which suits everyone fine since our knowledge of Italian has depleted over the years, and those of us in the Geritol set require numerous nightly bathroom breaks. After depositing our luggage in our allotted rooms, a walk around town is deemed necessary to orient ourselves with the Ortona of today. Very little is familiar, with the exception of the top of San Tommaso Church. The building in the center evokes a memory that has been rendered hazy through the passage of time, but its pockmarks from bullet and shrapnel bring back the reality of those times. 51 years ago, this was the scene which had been termed by some the Stalingrad of the West. San Tommaso Church, then, and now. Across from the church is a monument depicting those horrific days. Ken Copeland and Dave Galter are standing at left. Signs on a billboard announce the arrival of Canadian veterans to Ortona. Narrow streets, once meant for horse and cart, require vehicles to park partially on the sidewalk. Art Edge takes a breather here. Castello Aragonese, a castle sitting on a promontory overlooking the Adriatic. It was a ruin before the 1943 conflict, but a few more holes were probably added at that time. A breakwater helps protect the harbor of this marine port from the Adriatic storms. Fishing is one of the main industries of Ortona, although its fine beaches have become a haven for tourists and substantially add to its economy. Across the Adriatic is war-torn Yugoslavia, but this little port, though tranquil now, had seen its share of strife 50 years ago. And so nightfall comes to Ortona, and we cap off a very, very long day. With an evening meal at the Moderna Hotel, seated here are Blanche and Art Edge and Eva McPhee. Enjoying the crusty, butterless Italian bread before the main course of pork steaks are Joe McTima, Bill Buick, and Ben Whitmore. Bottles of Vino Bianco were evident at each table and made for a relaxing repast. Here we have, ignoring our camera, Bill and Jack Milnes with their cousin escort, Yvonne Hutton. Sequestered in the dimness of the corner are Wally McVie and Al Storier, while at the right the Springsteels and Galters. And so ends our first day with a rather cool shower during which everything in the bathroom got wet, including the two seating arrangements Europeans seem to prefer. The following morning, the city of Ortona had their Napoleon bus at the hotel to take us on a tour of the area and the city itself. The most interesting part was the stop at Casa Berardi, where Major Paul Triquet of the Van Deus won his Victoria Cross for attaining and holding this key lateral road in the Ortona sector. Casa Berardi has been left as it was back in December of 1943 and is a landmark must-see for any Canadians touring the area. While the scars of war are evident surrounding the sign, the cost in lives is equally evident in the nearby Moro River Cemetery. A small monument on the edge of a coulee shows the Royal 22nd insignia and is dedicated to the achievement of Major Triquet in securing this vital spot. The gang poses for a picture in front of Casa Berardi, and left to right are Joe McTamah, Dave Galter, Mel Likes, Charlie Swan, Al Storier, Mel McPhee, Sam Lenko, Wally McVie, Ken Copeland, Ed Boyd, Morris White, Albert Grandbois, Jack Milnes, and kneeling are Henry Helfrich, Ben Whitmore, and Ray Springsteel. Ortona, being a port city, had of course quite a few citizens in the Navy, and as a result they have a small naval museum. We were invited in for a brief ceremony at which presentations were made by they and by us. Taking part in proceedings are Lieutenant Colonel Bill Buick, Bruce Campbell, Ed Boyd, Giuseppe Imbolzano, and Wally Ross. Accepting this Italian naval plaque from the director of the museum is Bruce Campbell, representing the city of Edmonton. Here, Wally Ross pins a 49th Loyal Edmonton Regiment badge on the director's lapel after handing him a regimental plaque for the museum. Giuseppe Imbolzano holds a plaque of the city of Ortona's coat of arms presented to the group. Members of the city's Naval Association look on with interest, as do our people: Ben Whitmore, Lee Alstrom, Art Edge, Morris White, and Bill Buick. We hope Henry Helfrich's camera records sharper and brighter pictures than those you are viewing. Ortona's deputy mayor is left, while Eileen Ross smiles nicely center. The city of Ortona put on a luncheon for us that evening, which we did not record, but the following morning, Saturday, was our day to visit the Moro River Cemetery. This is the entrance to the cemetery about 1.5 miles south of Ortona. There are vineyards and olive groves in the area, and being near the Adriatic, there usually is a gentle, cooling breeze wafting over the immaculate grounds. Led by the Italian Naval Veterans Association, we enter the cemetery and assemble near the centrally located granite cross. Flag bearers to the left of the cross are Italian naval officers holding the City of Ortona coat of arms. Next is Colonel Bill Buick with the 49th Loyal Edmonton Regiment's insignia, ex-Colonel Glenn Jones with the City of Edmonton's coat of arms, ex-Colonel Lee Alstrom with the Alberta flag, and ex-RISM Wally McVie with the Canadian flag. After a brief service by clergy from the City of Ortona, wreaths are laid by the City of Edmonton, City of Ortona, and the Edmonton 49th. Ex-Colonel Wally Ross does the honors for the 49th. The flags of both nations unfurl slightly as the light breeze from the Adriatic covers the proceedings. The mayors of both cities pose with the Italian veterans. Center is Bruce Campbell, representing the City of Edmonton. Professor Gian Francesco Puletti, Mayor of Ortona, and Giuseppe Imbolzano, the Vice Consul. Our bearded interpreter, Tornillo Fabri, is upper left. The last post is played by an Italian bugler, ending the ceremony. After the last post, we search out familiar names from the past. This marker is Buck Holder, who was killed on the approach to Ortona. Art Edge, I, and Ray Springsteel pause for a picture. And this chap is Frank Lucifora, one of the caretakers of the Ortona Cemetery, who do such a fine job of looking after our Canadian boys who will forever lie in the soil of Italy. We are transported back to Ortona, where another wreath-laying ceremony is conducted at the Caduti Monument in Porta Calderi, Paese. Led by flag-bearers of both countries and Colonel Wally Ross, we then parade to San Tommaso Church. Art Edge has pinned an Alberta pin on this young lady's sweater. And here, taking a break for lunch, are Eva, Art and Blanche Edge, Charlie and Mamie Swan. That evening, we held a luncheon for our Ortona hosts. More presentations were made, one of which was by Ed Boyd, who is checking out his discourse, put forth in Italian, for which I'm sure he should have a medal. The Canadian flag is presented to the city. Maurice White and I are in illustrious company indeed, though I'm uncertain of the ranking of these two Italian officers. Refreshments are provided and certainly look appetizing, but not nearly so delicious as these Italian signorinas. I'm sure you'll agree. The items purchased originally for the people we were to be billeted with were dispensed in lottery fashion, and having our number was this young lady shown with wife Eva. She was the interpreter for many of the speeches. It's Sunday morning, and we are attending services at San Tommaso Church with the townspeople. These miniature copper water jugs were presented to each of us. They depict the method of carrying water by the women of Ortona during the war and prior times of strife. Each was inscribed, Recuerdo de Ortona, Remember Ortona. It is very unlikely we would forget, but the sentiment was appreciated. Colonel Pierre Lachapelle and his wife. Colonel Lachapelle was liaison officer in Naples, had joined us for a couple of days in Ortona. With a few free moments on our hands, we have headed to another museum. This one showing the Battle of Ortona, with many excellent photographs and several books depicting the wartime destruction of the city. Ray Springsteel and Henry Helfrich stand in front. Many of us wished to spend more time in the Moro River Cemetery, since we were rushed the day before, so the deputy mayor kindly ferried us out the 1.5 miles, making about 6 trips in the process. Their name liveth forevermore is the inscription on this pillar. Gordon Landon, age 21, and from my hometown of Drumheller. He was with the regiment only a few short days. A namesake, but no relation, is F.J. McPhee, age 23, Seaforth Highlanders. Corporal Gold, age 28, PLDGs, but one time 49er, as I understand. This group picture is of left to right, Wally McVie, Dave Galter, Ken Copeland, Art Edge, Al Storier, Mel Likes, Jack Milne, Bill Milne, Glenn Jones, and front Mel McPhee, Ben Whitmore, and Ray Springsteel. It is gratifying to know that the cemetery is visited by the Italian population as well, attested to by this photograph of Joyce Galter in the red sweater with these local ladies. On the outer edges of the cemetery are olive and grape orchards, and still not safe from Canadian raiders. Dave Galter hasn't lost his touch. Nor has Wally McVie, as he shows Glenn Jones the fine art of grape gulping. Al Storier looks on. This is Mario, an Italian friend from 1985 when my wife and I were here. He had been so kind to us then, it was great to renew acquaintances with him over several espressos, and last night a number of bottles of wine and champagne. But it was not only time to say goodbye to Mario, but to Ortona too, Ortona Mare, Ortona by the sea, the little Adriatic fishing port which is indelibly etched in the minds of those who had been here, and the price that was paid to wrest it from the enemy. The name Ortona will forever be connected with the city of Edmonton and the regiment which bears its name, the 49th. And so with bags packed, we'll leave the Moderna Hotel. And with new bus and driver, the Atlas Express is pointed northward. A noon stop for lunch, and we find that Socrates didn't drink that hemlock after all, but gave up his speaking tours for long-distance hauling. Afternoon coffee finds us at another roadside stop with this beautiful old church to marvel at. Another diversion further along was this church which Sam Lenko holds in memory for the last 50 years. Sam and Ed Boyd. Both had some tales to pass on to the rest of us. Sam with some of the exploits he was involved with, and Ed with overall views of the different campaigns. The setting sun finds us with water all around, indicating we are nearing our target, Mestre, about 20 minutes out of Venice. The morning sun finds us lined up for the boat ride to St. Mark's Square. Left to right, Eileen Ross with her back to the camera, Lee Alstrom, Wally Ross, Eva McPhee, Blanche and Art Edge, Wally McVie, Al Storier's Ear, and Sam Lenko. And one of our first sights on a Venetian canal is this water hearse, which begs the question, where do they bury people? Well, with the assistance of Edmonton's Public Library, I found out that the nearby island of San Michel is the burial site for Venetians. Since space is at a premium, bodies are allowed to remain in vaults there for only 12 years, after which time the ashes are to be interred elsewhere. Vaults are then reused. So, with that initiation to Venice, we carry on to St. Mark's Square, the initial place to be in this city built on a lagoon. Here, Eileen Ross and Sam Lenko are bombarded by pigeons. The two ex-colonels, Glenn Jones and Lee Alstrom, watching the bird display, were invaluable on this trip, scouting out any areas we were going in, and going ahead of the group and buying tickets for rail and boat, and seeing that stragglers were going in the right direction. Members of our group in front of St. Mark's Cathedral. The cathedral was originally built in 828, but was destroyed on 4 different occasions. And on each occasion was rebuilt to a more magnificent scale. A close-up of the frescoes and elaborate stonework attest to the artistry and craftsmanship attained in the construction of St. Mark's, said to be the finest example of Byzantine work. The north side of the plaza is the Procurati Vici, residences of the procurators or magistrates, usually numbering 9, built in 1584 and shows the switchover from Byzantine to Italian Renaissance. We were supposed to have a guide to take us around the square, but we were apparently gathered at the wrong location, and so we were directed to one of the things present-day Venice is noted for, its glassworks. In a very few maneuvers, this craftsman can turn out a miniature replica of one of the horses above the entrance to St. Mark's Cathedral. And, of course, you are directed to their fabulous showroom, where glassworks of every description and color dazzle the eye. With prices to match. Venice has few industries, and tourism has become the main source of income. On our second day in Venice, the dark skies of yesterday had disappeared, and a blue, blue sky was welcome indeed. And today we had the guide we should have had yesterday. She has taken us on a tour of St. Mark's Cathedral. Notice the temporary bridging at the entrance. This is because most buildings in Venice are sinking on the pilings underfoot. 2 weeks after this, the square was under a foot of water. Inside, there are frescoes and paintings by Venetian masters, and the School of Fine Arts has collections by Bellini, Titian, and Tintoretto, early Venetian artists. Also on St. Mark's Square and next to the cathedral is the Doge's Palace. The Doge was selected from the procurati, or magistrates, but he was mostly a figurehead in the ruling of early Venice. Many ornate buildings line Venice's Grand Canal, which forms an inverted S in the city, which is built on over 120 islands in a lagoon between the Po and the Piave rivers, on the northern end of the Adriatic Sea. There are 177 canals here, and transportation is usually by motorboat and gondola. Wally McVie takes advantage of an excellent day with his video camera. And so do I, catching he and Al Storier in my lens. This gondolier is looking for business. And this one has cornered the market. Venetians show a little independence by standing up in a gondola. A ride in a gondola evokes a romantic image, with the gondolier belting out O Sole Mio, but there is little romance with four ladies aboard. Note his colorful hat on the boat's bottom. The bridge is the Rialto, one of the more famous of the 400 in Venice. One of the most imposing structures on St. Mark's Square is the Campanile, or bell tower. It is 322 feet high and was originally constructed between 874 and 1150. It collapsed in 1902 and was reconstructed immediately. An elevator will whisk 17 people to the top in a very short time, and from there you have some wonderful views of the city. Here the bell tower casts its shadow over St. Mark's Cathedral as we look over the majestic metropolis said to be one of the most beautiful cities of the world. Here we look north over the Doge's Palace and San Marco Basin. Looking southward over the little island of San Giorgio Maggiore. Our little group at the top of the bell tower is Art Edge, Joe McTama, Blanche Edge, and Eva McPhee. And here I get my mug in this picture. One of our last pictures taken of Venice is the famed Rialto Bridge, as we bid arrivederci to this unique and magnificent city of northern Italy. While in Mestre, west of Venice, our accommodation was the Hotel Bologna, which we repaired to for our evening meals. Enjoying their last supper here are the following: Jack Milne, barely discernible at left, Phoebe and Bruce Campbell, Bill Milnes, Wally McVie, Al Storier at right, and Mamie Swan left. Jack Milnes in a little clearer light, Maurice White, Phoebe Campbell, Bruce, and Bill Milnes. Here, left to right, are Ken and Amelia Copeland, the Springsteels, Ray and Louise, and Eileen and Wally Ross. These three handsome gentlemen are Ben Whitmore, Joe McTama, and Dave Galter. And here, Joyce Galter, Mel Likes, and Al Grandbois. Eve McPhee, Blanche Edge, and Sam Lenko. and Henry Helfrich, Art Edge, and Mel McPhee. Apparently, the three colonels are missing and presumed AWOL. Les Alstrom, Glenn Jones, Ed Boyd, and wife Peggy. Our Atlas bus took us westward for our next stop, which was at Voghera, where there is a military museum. Colonel Ed Boyd had donated his military dress uniforms to their wartime display. There was an Italian military guard of honor, and wreaths were once again laid. We then went into the museum for official ceremonies. Flag bearers shown here were Wally McVie, I think behind our regimental flag, Glenn Jones with the City of Edmonton flag, Maurice White with Alberta's flag, Lee Alstrom with Canada's flag, and an Italian veteran with Italy's flag. Presentations were made by Voghera's mayor and museum officials and our people. We then broke up and toured the facility, which was some stables formerly used by the military, I understand. Eileen Ross seems to be counseling Dave Galter here, who seems to give it that yeah expression. Glenn Jones is on the left. I hope that's not your telephone number you're giving that lady, Lee. Lee Alstrom at the table where presentation gifts were displayed. A City Goes to War, Edmonton's offer, and a couple of 49er plaques are in evidence. And here, Ed Boyd looks them over. And Colonel Boyd's uniforms displayed. We are taken to Voghera City Hall for a small reception. The City of Edmonton was sponsoring the dinner that evening at our hotel, and after freshening up, we head down to where they served the pasta. More presentations are made, and Wally Ross has a plaque for Voghera's mayor. Seated left to right are Peggy Boyd, Giuseppe Imbalzano, Bruce Campbell, and Eileen Ross. After a number of acknowledgments, some of the veterans were asked to say a few words, and here Al Storier has his turn. It was here also we learned that one of our group, Jack Milnes, was a holder of the MM. Some of our people enjoying the grape and, you guessed it, pasta. And here, from left to right, are Joe McToma, Sam Lenko, Art Edges, Henry Helfrich, Charlie Swan, Ray Springsteel, Bill Milnes, Dave Galter, Mel McPhee, and Mel Likes. In this picture, Wally Ross, Albert Granbois, Art Edge, Henry Helfrich, Sam Lenko, and Tornillo Fabri, our distinguished-looking interpreter, now declared an honorary member of the 49th. Art Edge and I, after sampling the Voghera product of the grape, trying to determine its merits against that of Ortona's. There was no decision. After leaving Voghera, Giuseppe Imbalzano, the Italian vice consul for Alberta, had arranged for a stopover and tour of the Carthusian monastery at Pavia, a couple hours' drive south. The monastery dates back to 1396, and its monks have been following vows of silence and imploring to heaven in prayer. A few pictures do not lend justice to the beauty of this elaborate and well-defined structure, unknown to most of us until this day. Inside, the use of marble, gilt, and terrazzo tile, and elegant wood demonstrates the genius and artistry of those early Italians. Giving us the tour inside was this monk who came originally from Eritrea. His smile and softly spoken dialogue impressed us all. Each monk had his own quarters or cell, with separate garden, as indicated by the individual chimneys. They are known widely for practicing their ancient monastic skill of distilling liqueurs from herbs. It was here at Pavia that Nino, or Giuseppe Imbolzano, left us to return to Canada, regretfully, for he had been an initiator or go-between for many of our activities. Carrying on southward, our next stop was at Florence, or Firenze, as the Italians know it. We are at the Adriatico Hotel, where for the first time our passports were taken at the desk. To do any banking in Italy, your passport had to be shown, but this was a first for hotel accommodations. Peeking out of their room, are Al Storier and Wally McVie. The following morning, after stowing our luggage on the bus, we had a guided tour of Florence's inner city, and here our group is posed together near the city's famed cathedral, Santa Maria del Fiore. And here the cathedral, begun in 1298 and completed 1436, dominates a square crowded with resident and tourist. Other buildings reflect a similar architectural design. The usual horse and buggy way of seeing the more interesting parts of this city, of over 500,000 people, is available for hire. And walls that once helped deter an invader are now but reminders of a long ago past. The Italian artisan is still alive and well, turning out handmade picture frames. As we walk back into historic times, we are reminded of today's reality, when this police-escorted African dignitary is whisked away at speeds only confident Italian drivers can attain. Here's something from the past, also of the present, and probably will be of the future: roasting chestnuts. Our capable bus driver, Reno, has driven us to a height overlooking Florence for some last views before leaving the city. Here a wall which once served as protection probably now defines an estate. The beautiful city of Florence. The Arno River runs through Florence, making necessary a number of bridges, the most famous of which is Ponte Vecchio, foreground. Our Atlas bus is ready to load, and we say arrivederci to another great Italian city. A day is not nearly enough time to take in this center of the arts, and once stronghold of the rich Medici family. With the Canadian flag in our window, we are again southward bound. In fading light, we cross the Arno. Here, an ultralight is barely discernible in the setting sun. Our destination, Rocca Priora, about 40 kilometers southeast of Rome, will not be reached before sunset. And our accommodation, Villa La Rocca, looks like this in the morning. Very comfortable for our last few days in Italy. Rocca Priora sits on a very hilly terrain, like a lot of older Italian towns, initially as a defensive requirement. To the west are some small acreages and a forested area. Eastward is the village proper. And to the north can be seen a wide flat area where vineyards, olive groves, and farms are located. This lady is drying chestnuts in the sun. And this is our first trek into Rome, and we are gathered across from the Colosseum, while our guide goes through his discourse on the site. The Colosseum of Rome, erected in 72 AD to 80 AD. An amphitheater seating 80,000 spectators. It was used for sporting events of the day, where Christians fought lions and gladiators. At times it was flooded to accommodate nautical displays. Our next stop is at St. Peter's Basilica on St. Peter's Square. There are always crowds of tourists here, and we join them for an hour's discourse from our guide and the many others with tours. In doing so, we missed a short appearance by the Pope just before noon. Giovanni Bernini, architect and sculptor, is responsible for the colonnades that enclose the square. There are 3 pillars in a row in each colonnade, and at one spot in mid-square they fall directly in line so that it appears there is only one in each. Here is Michelangelo's Pieta, the Virgin grieving over the body of Christ, completed at age 24, and St. Peter's most cherished possession. Remember 3 coins in a fountain? Trevi Fountain, a must-see sight in Rome. Statuary abounds in Rome, and every square has one dedicated to some famous or mythical personage. Meanwhile, back at our mountaintop accommodation, Villa Rocca, our night's sleep was somewhat disturbed by barking dogs. Here we rest weary feet, and here on our balcony we enjoy a cup of tea with Art and Blanche Edge. Instead of joining the group to see the Sistine Chapel today, we have opted for a visit to the nearby town of Frascati. While the girls shop, Art and I wander around the town. And here, Art has finally found someone who understands his recently polished Italian. At least he seemed to understand. A little color is added to Frascati Street with this display of flowers. It's near October's end, and back home they would surely not survive outside. I wonder if they were up at Rocca Priora last night. I guess they decided they could just as well use a parking spot as any Fiat. Have a breakdown? This is how it's done in Italy. Every town in Italy has a dominant church building, and this one in Frascati is dedicated to Pope Clemente XI. The present Pope, John Paul, spends part of his summer here. They say, "Let sleeping dogs lie," and this couple in heavy embrace in the background are doing just that. We understand this is a private home in Frascati. Well, today we are heading south to Monte Cassino, that embattled monastery that was brought to near destruction in 1944. Ken Copeland's image is caught in the bus window as the miles fly by. After several hours driving, the monastery appears, and with it the recollection of the thunderous roar of over 800 artillery guns on the morning of May 23, 1944, when the attack on the Hitler line began. As we snake our way up the mountain, the new Monte Cassino spreads out before us. While I had not gone through the town in 1944, my memory of what I had seen of the area was a rather small place with hardly a wall left standing. There was certainly a commanding view of the Liri Valley, and it was easy to understand the difficulty involved in trying to capture this high ground. We have arrived at the monastery after a tortuous climb, passing it at least 5 times before we got to it. It has been brought back to its original state, except for some frescoes and paintings that were missing during the war. Reconstruction took 10 years and was wholly financed by Italy. Many civilians died here when they sought shelter during the bombing, but it is said not one German soldier lost his life here, since there were none in the monastery. They were in the many caves and fortifications below, though with still a commanding view of the valley. The very beautiful and imposing Polish cemetery is seen from the monastery. It was the Polish army that eventually took Monte Cassino and the monastery at a heavy cost indeed. Over 1,000 Poles lie buried here. We were surprised to find this turtle a resident of the Abbey's garden. There were 2, actually, and the only creatures in evidence. Our descent from the monastery is a little easier than it was going up, and afforded great views of the valley. An odd-looking structure, center left, looks as though it were assembled from shell casings or tank parts, but its meaning or presence is unexplained. The main reason for us visiting the area is the cemetery here at Monte Cassino. Just as the Moro River Cemetery at Ortona is meticulously kept, so is the Monte Cassino resting place where many Canadian boys are interred. Each of us have our own thoughts about the markers we have just seen, faces remembered, young faces from so long ago. And we drink a toast to all of them, led in this by Ed Boyd. Our last day is spent in Rome, and we have come to St. Peter's Square to be blessed by him and to hear his sermon. Here a Polish group, some in native dress. The colorful Swiss Guard in attendance. And shown here, many of our group. Left to right are front row, Phoebe Campbell, Ed and Peggy Boyd, Eileen Ross, second row Joe McTima, Charlie and Mamie Swan, Ken and Amelia Copeland, Louise and Ray Springsteel. Third row, Art and Blanche Edge, Eva McPhee, Albert Granbois, Lila and Tornillo Fabry. Fourth row, Sam Lenko, Maurice White, Mel Lykes, Dave Galter, and Ben Whitmore standing. The canopy under which Pope John Paul will make his address. We are some 40 rows down. Some of the audience in attendance, estimated at 100,000. The Pope was driven through several avenues between the audiences. And he bestows his blessings on all, and the different groups in attendance are acknowledged, as were visiting veterans from Canada. And so we leave Rome, this our last day. And it is fitting that in the fading light we snap a picture of Italy's Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, for we had seen many in the last two cemeteries. We arrive early the next morning at Rome's Leonardo Airport to emplane for Canada, and some 14 hours later we are passing that familiar sign on Highway 2. It's good to be home. There are a number of people to be thanked for making this 16-day journey into the pass such a success. Colonel Wally Ross for getting his head together with Colonel Ed Boyd, Giuseppe Imbalzano, the Vice Consul, Tornillo Fabry, who interpreted for us much of the time, the younger colonels Bill Buick, Lee Alstrom, and Glenn Jones for helping make the trip easier for some of us oldsters, the ladies who graced our tables and kept us in line most of the time. And a special thank you to my wife Eva, who endured my shortcomings the past couple of weeks that I took to put this slideshow together. Thank you all.